Most people don't lose negotiations because they lack the right words. They lose because pressure makes them abandon their own position. A pause feels like rejection. A firm tone feels like danger. And suddenly, a reasonable question feels rude. Negotiation is not really a test of how persuasive you are. It is a test of what happens inside you when the room becomes uncomfortable. Because the moment you start protecting the other person's feelings more than your own interests, the negotiation has already changed. For many people, this pattern began long before their first salary discussion or rent renewal. They learned early that being easy kept relationships safe. Asking for less avoided tension. Staying agreeable earned approval. So they became skilled at reading faces, softening requests, and backing down before anyone had to say no. Years later, the setting changes, but the instinct remains. A recruiter pauses, a landlord sounds irritated, or a salesperson becomes firm, and their nervous system reads discomfort as a warning. They are no longer evaluating the deal. They are trying to restore safety. They did not learn to negotiate badly. They learned to protect connection by becoming inexpensive to deal with. The first sign is that they treat discomfort as danger. They ask for a higher salary, and their manager goes quiet. They question a fee, and the salesperson's tone becomes colder. Nothing terrible has happened, but their body reacts as if the relationship is suddenly at risk, so they rush to repair the moment. They soften the request. They explain too much. They say, "I understand if that's not possible," before the other person has even answered. This is where they begin negotiating against themselves. They mistake tension for proof that they have gone too far. But discomfort is not evidence. A pause does not mean the request is unreasonable. A serious expression does not mean the conversation is damaged. Sometimes the other person is simply thinking, calculating, or waiting to see whether you will retreat. And if you always retreat first, they never have to reject you. You do it for them. The second sign is that they experience no as a verdict. A landlord says, "We can't lower the rent." A recruiter says, "This is the best we can do." And instead of hearing information, they hear judgment. Your request was unreasonable. You have no leverage. The conversation is over. So they stop asking questions. But no is rarely a complete answer. It may mean not at that price, not under those terms, not from this person, or not without more evidence. Strong negotiators do not treat rejection as humiliation. They treat it as data. They ask, which part is not workable? What flexibility exists elsewhere? Who would have the authority to approve this? Because a no does not always close the negotiation. Sometimes it simply reveals where the real negotiation begins. The third sign is that they cannot sit inside silence. They name their number, ask for better terms, or question the total price. Then the other person says nothing. That silence feels unbearable. So they rush to fill it. They explain why the request is reasonable. They reveal their budget. They lower the number. They reassure the other person that they are still interested. And in trying to reduce the tension, they weaken their own position. Silence is not always rejection. Sometimes the other person is thinking. Sometimes they are calculating. And sometimes they are simply waiting to see whether you will negotiate against yourself. The person who cannot tolerate silence often gives away information, leverage, and money just to make the moment feel normal again. Strong negotiators understand that after a clear question, silence is not empty. It is working. The fourth sign is that they confuse approval with fairness. They do not only want a better deal, they also want the other person to keep seeing them as reasonable, grateful, and easy to work with. So they begin protecting their image. They say, "I completely understand if there's no flexibility." They apologize before asking. They reduce the request so no one can call them difficult. But fairness and approval are not the same thing. Someone can dislike your question and still be offering unfair terms. Someone can remain friendly while charging you more than necessary. And someone can respect you without enjoying every boundary you set. When being liked becomes the hidden goal, people often pay for that approval with money, time, and leverage. They are not just negotiating the deal. They are negotiating to avoid being misunderstood. The fifth sign is that they treat authority language as objective truth. A recruiter says, "This is our final offer." A landlord says, "That's the policy." A salesperson says, "Everyone pays this fee." And the words sound official enough to end the conversation. Sometimes those limits are real. But sometimes standard only means unchallenged, and final only means the best offer given so far. Strong negotiators do not assume every boundary is fake. They simply refuse to confuse confidence with proof. They ask, which part is fixed? Who has the authority to change it? If the price cannot move, what else can? Because authority language is most powerful when no one asks what it actually means. The sixth sign is that they enter the negotiation without real options. They want one job, one apartment, one car, or one outcome so badly that every no feels like a threat. By the time the conversation begins, they have already imagined the future. They have pictured the office, arranged the furniture, or decided this is the only deal that can work. That emotional attachment quietly destroys their leverage. Because when walking away feels impossible, the other side does not need to pressure them very hard. A deadline feels more urgent. A small concession feels more valuable. A weak offer starts to look like the only offer. Strong negotiators create alternatives before they need them. They compare. They wait. They keep another path open. The fewer options you have, the more every negotiation feels like survival. Beneath all of these patterns is one hidden mechanism. They are not only negotiating over money, terms, or price. They are negotiating for emotional safety. They want to avoid being disliked. They want to avoid looking greedy. They want to avoid the silence, the tension, and the possibility of losing the opportunity. So they make concessions that have nothing to do with the actual value of the deal. They lower the number to reduce anxiety. They accept urgency to escape uncertainty. They say yes because relief feels safer than resistance. That is why negotiation advice often fails them. The problem is not that they do not know what to say. The problem is that under pressure, comfort becomes more important than fairness. They think they are protecting the relationship. But in reality, they are teaching other people that their boundaries disappear when the room becomes uncomfortable. So how do they change? Not by becoming colder, louder, or more aggressive. The goal is not to eliminate discomfort. It is to stop letting discomfort make the decision. The first principle is simple: discomfort is not evidence. A pause, a firm tone, or a disappointed expression does not prove your request is unreasonable. It only proves the moment is uncomfortable. The second principle is to treat no as information. Ask what part is fixed, what would need to change, and where flexibility still exists. Rejection becomes less powerful when you stop treating it as a verdict. The third principle is to decide before pressure arrives. Know your target, your minimum, your questions, and the point where you will walk away. A boundary is much easier to keep when it was chosen before fear entered the room. The fourth principle is to let silence do its job. After you ask, stop talking. Do not explain away your position. Do not rescue the other person from the tension. Do not negotiate against yourself. Strong negotiators are not fearless. They simply remain present while fear is in the room. The next time a negotiation becomes uncomfortable, notice what you are tempted to abandon first: your question, your number, your silence, or your ability to walk away. That moment is the real negotiation. You do not need to become colder. You do not need to become someone who enjoys conflict. You only need to stop disappearing from your own side of the table. Because better negotiators still feel pressure. They simply no longer let pressure speak for them.